Welcome to the App Doc channel. Today, I will talk about 5 essential tips you need to know to create beautiful apps. These tips help you unlock the SwiftUI potential to its next level. If you are new to SwiftUI, you must watch this video. Stay with me until the end, and let's dive in. Let's start with a recent API. You can see that the get card here is using a fixed size. Usually, we set the card size based on the size of the screen. So tip number 1, use containerRelativeFrame to set frame relative to its parent. Here's how. I want the card width to be 80% of the screen. So I remove the width here and use containerRelativeFrame for the horizontal axis. Set count to 10 and set span to 8. This divides the parent into 10 columns and span our view across 8 columns. That makes our view with 80% of the screen. We can set relative size on both axes. Instead of using count and span, we can use closure to set relative size for each axis. For example, I set the width to be 80% and I set height to be 50%. Let's take a look at another example. When we align multiple views, we can also set the spacing to the relative frame. You might notice that the red button here doesn't look good, while the green one looks just fine. One solution to fix this is to render just the icon when there is not enough space. But how can we do that? How can we check for the available space, and what condition should we write? Good news, we don't have to do that. Tip number 2, use ViewThatFits for adaptive view. That means we can render view in a different style based on the available space without having to check manually. Let's go to the adaptive button. This overlay is where our problem is. Let's fix that with ViewThatFits. Nice. Now the red button only shows the icon like we want. Here's how it works. ViewThatFits will render only one of its child views in order based on the available space. It will try to render the first child first. If it doesn't fit, it will render the second one, and so on. So, if it has enough space, it will render the first child like the green one here. If it doesn't fit, it will render the second one like the red one here. You can add the third and the fourth one if you want. Back to the card example again. In tip number 3, I will show another way to use a relative size. We can use GeometryReader to read size and frame of the parent view. This is how I achieve the same 80% width and 50% height using GeometryReader. You can see the card moves because GeometryReader expands itself to fit the parent. This is a side effect you need to be aware of. You might wonder, why should we care about GeometryReader if we've already had containerRelativeFrame? First, if you want to support all iOS versions like 14 or 15, you can use containerRelativeFrame because it's available in iOS 17. Second, GeometryReader can read frame, while containerRelativeFrame cannot. So, we can use GeometryReader to achieve more advanced animations. Alright, congratulations! Now, we are at tip number 4. This one is an advanced technique, and it helps you achieve many wonderful animations and effects. such as a sticky header you're seeing here. In SwiftUI, it's very easy to pass the data from a parent view to its child view. But if we want to pass the data from child view back to the parent view or between siblings, it's very complicated. But we can do that using PreferenceKey. PreferenceKey allows us to communicate up the view hierarchy. You may think of it as a pipe or a portal that lets us transfer data from one place to another place we want. The image needs a scroll view offset, and we need the most recent value from the GeometryReader to perform sticky effect. But without PreferenceKey, there is no way we can update the recent value of the scroll offset. Here's how we use PreferenceKey. First, we create a struct conforming to the PreferenceKey protocol. Assign the default value. Most of the time, we use 0 or an empty string or nil based on the type. And for the type, it must be the type of the value we want to pass. In this case, the scroll offset is the min y, which is cgfloat. So we use cgfloat here. Second, use .preference to put the data into the preference key. And third, use onPreferenceChange modifier to observe the value passed into the preference key. And finally, use this closure to transfer the data elsewhere. For example, we assign to the state, so we can use it across the entire view hierarchy. It's pretty tough to understand it at first. Take your time, don't rush. I give you the links to read more in the description. But remember, if you want to communicate up the view hierarchy, think of PreferenceKey. And here we have arrived at the final tip. If you want to make your code simple and clean, you must love this one. Tip number 5. We can create our own ViewModifier. This is how. We create a struct conforming to the ViewModifier protocol. Then we add our modifiers to the content. This can be something else, but for now, I want to make the scroll offset look simpler. And we can use it. Like this. Now we can use our own view modifier anywhere. The code is a lot cleaner. We can make it even simpler by creating a view extension for the modifier, like this. And now we can use it like this. See? It's a lot simpler. And we can also do that with a card shadow. Let's go to the card example. here, we can also do that. See? It's still the same. If it's simple enough, we don't have to create a ViewModifier struct. And that's 5 tips you need to know to upgrade your SwiftUI to the next level. I will make a dedicated video for each one in the future. If you have any feedback or questions, please comment down below. And if you love the content, please like and subscribe. And see you in the next one.